Hello, everyone. Hello, my dear friends. Here we are again in this study of Manoel Philomeno de Miranda and the book Planetary Transition. That's what we're doing today by our friend Givaldo Franco, who is certainly looking from the spiritual world and happy that we're continuing this mission, this legacy, this work, right, of learning Spiritism and using these beautiful books by Manoel Philomeno de Miranda to learn to study some very interesting topics about the relationship of the spiritual world and our world, and a little bit about obsession and a little bit about mediumship and so many other things that we learn in depth with real experiences, real examples from Manoel Philomeno de Miranda, my friends. That's such a great opportunity that we have to continue this work, right? And I know you guys are coming in, and we're going to have just a couple minutes so everybody has a chance to join us. And we're going to be starting very, very soon our activity today, our study, right? And if you guys want to keep track of things, hello, Anna. Hello, good evening. If you guys want to keep track of things, we're doing chapter 4 and chapter 5 today. We're going to do 2 chapters. All right. Okay. So, as we do every night, we're going to start with a short prayer, right? Asking for blessings and guidance for this study that we're doing every Monday night. Okay. So, if you guys out there connected with us, let us all close our eyes and feel this good vibrations around us. Let's feel connected to our Creator, our Father, Mother God, and our Master Jesus. And let us thank for this opportunity, for the blessing of living, for the blessing of being here tonight, connected, together, learning and studying, exactly like our Master told us to do so many years ago. May God bless this small opportunity that we're having of learning. Thank you. So be it. All right, my friends, I can see some of you joining now. And again, welcome to our study. It's an immense pleasure that I have to be here every Monday night talking about Manoel Philomeno de Miranda and having a nice chat about this super interesting books that we're going to be going through. And we're already in chapter 4 and 5. We're moving along pretty quick. So I hope you guys enjoying it. And let's get right into it because there's a lot to talk about. If you had a chance to, all right, it is Rogério there. I know Rogério. That's good to see you. You're hanging in there. That's good. Thank you, Teresa, for always supporting. That's fantastic to see all of you. Okay. All right. So let's get to our book. Let's see what we're going to be talking about today. And today there's a lot, guys. So, if for any reason you feel like, there's a lot going on, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Hi, Donald. Hello. Nice to see you too. Okay. Okay, guys. So remember, we've been for the last few weeks, we've been in this preparation for a big journey, right? So we have Yvonne, we have Manoel Filomeno, we have Ryan, like all the spirits are coming together to go to this mission, right? And this is the time. And they're actually going now on chapter 4, right? So it's finally time. So important topics on this chapter, right? Um, Obviously they talk about Earth getting there, so eventually we were going to reach the stage of a happy planet, right? But there's still a little bit of bumps along the way, right? And we got to be prepared for those, right? Now, Manuel also talks about the climate change responsibility of humans and the idea of poisonous gases being released in the atmosphere. There's a lot of important topics that they discuss in the beginning, as almost like a preamble to that mission, saying that yep, there are things going on planet Earth that are not great, but it's kind of a part of an important step for humanity to sort out what to do with this ship, with this beautiful planet that we have in our hands, right? Now, they also talk about the scene that they're going to encounter, right? And this is where things starts to get real, like some of us will say, right? Things are getting real now, right? Because Manoel Filomeno starts to describe the tragedy, right? The destroyed buildings after the tsunami, right? The crime, the exploration of victims, right? All the tragedy going on, right, at that moment. Yes, the book title, yeah, that's a Planetary Transition. We have it right here, Planetary Transition, right? Divaldo Franco, right there. And Manoel Philomeno de Miranda, and we're Manoel Philomeno, and we're doing chapter 4 and 5 today. Okay. Um, so they talk about the spiritual challenges, right, of epidemics, right, the abrupt discarnations, right, and all the things that are happening during a major catastrophic event, right, like we see after tsunami in 2000, right? Um, so let's go and talk about what's going on. Okay. All right. So first of all, organization is everything, right? So when they're going through a trip, just like we do, like if you're really worried about get somewhere on time and getting organized and beat rush hour, get to traffic, right? So we set up a nice time to meet, we get everything organized. That's exactly what they do, right? Nothing different. So this is a caravan of multiple spirits that are going in a mission, right, to help spirits incarnated and discarnate alike that are going through the tsunami, right? And they meet at this ecumenical temple, which I like this because we forget about the fact that all the spirits that are in the spiritual world, they're not spiritists, right? They're not all Catholics or they're not all Jew, right? They all have their own religion that the remnants of that religion, when they're incarnated, are still there, right? And it's still part of them. So when they are in the spiritual world, as we see in the first chapters, right? There's people representing different faiths and different traditions in the spiritual world, and they are learning and growing and continuing their journey of learning more, right? While in the spiritual world, but they still keep their roots, right? So the coordinator of this mission is a very interesting story that Manoel Philomeno tells us, because that's important for the whole story, right? It's called Dr. Charles White. So he lived in the area, Indonesia, right? And he was what they call a conquistador, right? Which is the conqueror, right? That actually was part of this. They felt superior, right? As Europeans, right? They came to Indonesia, and they were like, we're gonna conquer, we're gonna take advantage of this poor people, kind of their mindset, right? But Dr. White, Charles White, of course, was not one of your typical, right, explorers at the time, right? He started to learn, right, with them, right? And he started to realize how incredible and how much wisdom was there, right? From the natives, from the Indonesian people at that time. And I'm gonna read just a little bit of the book, so to exemplify what are we talking about. In my edition is page 44, but if you have a different edition, it's about in the middle of chapter 4. Okay, so here's what they say, and I'm going to read directly again, Planetary Transition, directly from the book. Okay, here we go. So Charles says, we found in their seemingly crude worship, he's talking about the Indonesians, right? Profound information handed down orally from generation to the next along their traditional activities. Their shamans and their spirit communications, because they were communicating with spirits at that time. Mediumship is not new, right? We know that. They were at the same time priests, they were doctors, thinkers, scholars, counselors, administrators. They were like the most important and reference point to that society, right? And from then, just like any other native group, like you can think about, right? Indigenous peoples, right? That's the same idea, right? Incredible connection with nature, incredible knowledge, right? And most of it was completely devastated and obfuscated by the first explorers, right? And the colonizers. And then Charles continues, right? From them, we learned about the interference of the dead in the lives of the living. See, he started to learn about spiritual relationship with actually the Indonesian people when he was there, right? And also learned that most effective therapy for facing the challenges of the health disease binomial is always reciprocal love and care by all members of the clan. How beautiful is that, my friends? Think about it. This is a well educated, powerful European individual that came to this forgotten place, according to them, right, in islands, and thinking he was there as the incredible, knowledgeable, powerful individual. He actually realized, and that was he was humbled, right, understanding that, hey, wait a minute, right, actually I have more to learn from these people than actually teach them. We heard a similar story. Yes, Jesus. Remember when Jesus was having a conversation with a well-educated man, right? The knowledgeable guy that started asking questions, right? Same idea. So you never know. Like you never know when you're going to learn, and that's a teaching for us to understand the importance of paying attention to things around us, and every opportunity we have to learn. And the teaching cannot be more profound, is that the most important thing for this binomial, this two-way relationship with health and disease, is having reciprocal love at all levels in society. This is literally exactly what Jesus told us, right? Exactly. Jesus came to tell us about the love and how the love could actually drive us, right, directly towards spiritual evolution, right? Love one another, love your neighbor, love God. Like this is it's the same thing. So Charles, when it was incarnated, he was so touched by this that he actually started to um, now learn from them and discarnated there. And not only that, he became one of the spiritual mentors in Indonesia, right? So he's the guide. So as you can imagine, my friends, uh, any one of those caravans and spiritual missions that we're talking about is incredibly well organized, right? There's a local guide. There's someone with experience in the area. There's someone who has the medical background. Someone has the religious background. Someone has the rescue background. It's not random, right? Why would it be, right? We do the same, right? There is a nose where you have a caravan to Africa through one of their Fraternity Without Borders, for example, groups, right? What do? They organize it, they set up a place, right? They have people that have different knowledges, they organize them where to go, how to go, what to do, right? There's people in need. So what are the needs? They know ahead of time, right? They don't go blindly, right? And just say, yeah, let's help these people out now. That does not happen, right? So incredible, interesting story to hear from Charles, right? And why is he doing this? He is actually the leader of that caravan. And Charles also explains to us that there's two steps in this mission, right? The first step is go immediate rescue where the tsunami hit, right? And this is December. This is early after tsunami, right? December to January. And then the second part of the mission is going to be in Brazil, helping bring some very special spirits that are going to incarnate to continue to drive the spiritual evolution of our planet, right? And this is so interesting, my friends. Now I'm gonna completely digress and bring something else here, as most of you know. Sometimes I do that, but I find it interesting that I was reading the news, watching the news this weekend, and telling the story about this incredible Brazilian student that was able to beat all the possible challenges you can imagine, and actually applied to medical school in Brazil. And not only he passed medical school and admitted, he was the first place, right? Best marks ever. And he never got like he had barely had any support, barely have anything to read, the books, computer, like nothing. He was just this incredible, and he was a kind, knowledgeable, writes really well. And one of the interviewers asked someone, and the teacher, I think, and the teacher said, "Well, um, he sounds and writes like he's one of those old, incredibly accomplished writers." And then I'm thinking to myself, that is actually probably true. He is one of those spirits incarnating again, right? And well, of course, bringing some of that knowledge back to our planet to help us. So this is we're going to be hearing about some of the spirits that come with this incredible knowledge, huge mission, right? How are they being brought back, right, to help us out? So stay tuned. That's going to come up in a few chapters ahead, because next we're going to go straight into this incredible challenging scene. And you gotta read this chapter 5 that we kind of come up to multiple times, because every line has a kind of a has a little bit of a discovery period where you're going to realize, well, never thought about that. And that's, I don't know if you feel that way reading it, because that's how I felt reading it. And I read it several times. So chapter 5, here we go. A very important one, right? We're going to spend a little bit of extra time here talking about this. Okay. So in chapter 5 at 6 p.m. as scheduled, right? As they do in a very organized fashion. They do a prayer like they do every time, similar to what we do, most of us, no matter what faith you have, right? You have your organized prayers through the day or through the weekend or through your routines, right? Same, not different from any of us, right? The board is, they call it the vehicle, right? That could take them to places. And it's interesting because we always think about spiritual world. Why do you need some sort of transportation, right? You're a spirit. You can just move freely, right? Through air. It's not that simple, right? I know the principle is that, right? But there are many interesting observations about that. André Luiz in the book Nosso brings that beautifully explained, right? Right in the kind of the beginning, the first chapter 10, I think, talks about um, the how André Luiz deals with the idea of taking a bus, right, in Nosso, right? And Clarencio, the mentor at that time, right, and Lysias helping him out at that time, explains to him that, well, listen, not every spirit is ready to take full understanding of the spiritual body and their new reality, right? So moving is not that straightforward, because they're still connected very much to their earthly experiences, right? And depending where you're going, if it's a place that's kind of spiritually dense and difficult, it's even harder for them to move, right? So eventually, yes, eventually you can move as a spirit as your thought. If you think about it, you can be there. That's simple as that. So that's why Jesus is everywhere, right? Because his thought encompasses all of us, and by that he can literally move around like anywhere he wants, right? And there's no time. Time doesn't exist for that movement, right? But for us, we're still connected to this body and still very much engaged with this planet. Moving is still challenging, right? So that's why in the spiritual world, what do? Collectively, they can actually project through that manipulation of the spiritual energy and the universal cosmic fluid around them. They can actually project out a vehicle, right? By creating that with their own thoughts, right? And by creating that vehicle, they can allow the spirits now to go into it and be taken to places, right? Through their action of their modification of their thoughts that can modify the universal cosmic fluid and generate real things. So thoughts are real. They you can see them, you can literally touch them in the spiritual world, right? You can connect to them, right? And that's why in spiritual world we'll still have, particularly in places that are still very close to our earth, right? Like where we're looking now, you still have different modes of transportation, right? That's a surprise to us. And for all of us that are listening to this and are not really, did not ever heard about it or never studied spiritism or anything like that, I hear you. Okay. This is a hard thing to get in the beginning, right? And you're like, oh my goodness, you're a spirit. Like, well, why do you need a car? Yeah, absolutely. Right. So what, and I had time with, I had a hard time with this too. Like, I'm a scientist by training, right? And I always been thinking about, in the beginning, I was like, okay, I don't get this. Is too much for me, right? When I was reading Adreli's first time. But then I started to think about even things on my own experience, right? And I started to think about, wait a minute, we're so connected, right, to certain things that we don't let go, right? Habits, ideas, right? Behaviors, patterns, right? We are incredibly good at keeping that, consistency in our thoughts and our actions in different ways, right? So then that's when I realized is like, can you imagine if we were to go back in time and realize how transportation were before, right? And try to transport ourselves to transportation now, right? And then try to move our transportation down the road to the future. And then I realized, well, that's exactly what's happening, right? Basically in the spiritual world close to us, we're basically just a little step ahead of where we are right now, right? And by doing that, our thoughts, our minds, our patterns, our expectations are the same. So of course you're going to have a city, right? Because that's exactly where we're trained and know and understand what life is by living in a city, right? In a place, in a physical environment that we need that, right? Like it's just like try to imagine yourself going to a place that you have none of what you have right now. You don't have cars, food, dishes, places, houses, clothes, anything. You don't have anything. How would you feel? Think about that, right? I am sure if you think very deeply into this, you're going to quickly realize that I cannot live like that, right? So there you go, my friends. That is to me the most clear way of understanding the spiritual world and the resemblance with the physical world, right? Just a big parenthesis there for us. Okay. And if you have questions, please drop a line. I'm reading your comments here. We can follow through it. All right. So important points. Preparation, right? So Manoel Philomeno says in the beginning, so higher order spirits reached the area in December, right? Remember the tsunami was December, right? To set up temporary communities to receive those who would discarnate in affliction. See, everything planned out, right? They already went there first, organize outposts, know what people need, and got everything sorted out, right? What's the scenario they're looking at? This is where the description gets tense, right? Because now think about, I don't know if you guys all remember, but it's important to remember, right? That tsunami wiped out 150,000 lives immediately, right? In the first shock wave that was distributed throughout the area, right? So the psychosphere, the everything, all the emotions, the suffering, the pain, the everything was surrounding that area. Now, from a spiritual perspective, you can kind of imagine that, right? Just try to think about when you get close to someone or a group of people that are in deep pain and suffering, right? You can feel it. Of course we do, right? Because that energy, we connect to it. Imagine now 150,000 people in that same scenario and all the families and everything, right? Around it. So that creates this very dense, and they talk about this frankly crowd of spirits homing around, not knowing what to do, not knowing they were discarnated, right? You have a combination of, you know, decomposing bodies and no dwelling, no water. They describe spiritual fights breaking out because again, the spirits that are discarnating, some of them don't even know they're discarnated. So because their instinct is to fight, is like to punch each other, well, the spirits will try to punch each other if they have a disagreement, right? So all of this is happening, right? And should not be surprising to all of us because we know how chaos looks like. If you look at the TV nowadays, you can kind of see how things can get out of control quite quickly, right? Particularly if people are fighting for their rights, right? It happens, right? They also talk about the highlights of this was like the international contributions arriving, right? But obviously many criminals taking advantage of that, organized crime, people trying to loot and explore and take advantage of it. This is all happening in real time, right? When the spirits are coming to help. They also talk about this very, very strong spiritual connections, right? Between the newly discarnate and their bodies. And why is that? Well, because most of them are actually unaware of what happened. And again, this is something that we have to do a little bit of thinking to go back and kind of try to put ourselves, have a little bit of empathy, right? And put ourselves in that scenario, understanding that, imagine that you're just randomly on the beach taking your time, doing nothing, and literally in 1 to 3 minutes, everything that existed in your life is gone. Like everything, your place, your family, your friends, your house, your body, everything, right? And you wake up in the spiritual world now, and all you see is this chaotic, devastating, dark, complicated environment where we have incarnate spirits, discarnate spirits interacting constantly. You have destruction, you have matter decomposing, you have diseases, you have people doing good things, people doing not so good things, and this is all happening at the same time. It's like you're waking up from a bad dream, but the bad dream is real. Now, for every one of us here that had a little bit of a bad dream sometimes, and we wake up, we're like, oh my God, I'm so glad, right? This thing's over. Just imagine for a tiny, weeny second waking up and realizing that the dream is actually now the real part of it. It's not as easy as it sounds, right? Because yeah, it is hard, right? So this is how the spirits are when they're discarnated in a tragic scenario like that, right? And because of that, they want to return. They want their body. They want that life or their physical connection to revive, to re-engage. So they don't want to let go, right? So that connection is very strong, right? So that is driven by thoughts, right? And who we are and what we think we are at that moment, right? So part of the mission we're going to hear about is exactly trying to bring those spirits and taking them to wake up in their spiritual reality, but now understanding what's happening. And this is challenging, right? Remember, there's different religions happening, discarnating at the same time, different religious backgrounds. That's why the caravan has different representative religions, right? To address different concerns, right? As we're going to see in some of the slides that are coming up. All right, my friends. How are we doing so far? We're all good, right? We're all hanging in there in this late Monday night, right? Everybody's still awake. Right, Rogério? Rogério's still there? Okay. Let's keep going. Okay. So let's step back now because this is going to be intense, right, in chapter 5. So we need to do a quick step 5. Isabella's there. Thank you. All good. Nice to see you there. Yeah, it's nice to do a little step back because it's gonna get intense, right? So let's go back to the Spirits book, which is basically the go-to information resource for everything we're talking about today, right? So question number 155 of the Spirits book: how does the separation of the soul from the body occur? Right? It's important to know because that's exactly what we're learning from Manuel now, right? So once the bonds that held the soul are ruptured, right, it disengages itself. Makes sense, right? And then there's a follow-up question. Does this separation occur instantly through an abrupt transition? Is there a well-defined dividing line between life and death, right? The Spirit's answer, no. The soul liberates itself gradually, right? It does not escape like a captive bird that is suddenly set free. The two states touch and blend with each other. This way, the spirit disengages itself little by little from its bonds. They unravel, they do not break. That's a perfect description, right? So it unravels, like it slowly understands what's happening, why this needs to happen, and then the person starts to realize, okay, my life is as incarnate is over this time, we're going to go to my spiritual life, and then by doing that, that connection starts to fade away, right? And you really wake up in the spiritual world. But as you can tell from chapter 5, this is not what's happening if someone who goes through this tragic event sometimes, particularly if you're still way too connected, right, to that physical life. For spirits that are obviously more evolved and understanding of the spiritual life, they can do that disconnection quick right? Because they're like, okay, I got it. I'm here. We're going to move on. Yeah. If you do that quick, then the disconnection is quick. And then it's as easy as that, right? But not for us, my friend. Not for all of us, right? I'm sure all of us have some sort of challenges, right? Going through that period. All right. The next question. Do all spirits experience the confusion that follows the separation um, of the soul and the body to the same degree and for the same amount of time? So, in other words, Kardec saying, is of course when you go to the other side, it's not like super straightforward, right? They're just going to look around and say, "Hey, I'm a spirit. I'm all good. I'm free." No, of course not, right? Imagine there's a lot of things they're going to process, right, as a spirit. What's happening, why it's happening, where's everybody, what I'm doing here, what's next, like there's so many questions, right? So there's a state of confusion of not knowing, like, is this me or not, is this my physical body or not, like, was like, poke me, see if I'm alive, that kind of thing, right? So that happens, right? It's real, right? And of course the spirits are going to answer, no, it depends on how evolved you are, right? Those who are already purified and almost immediately self-aware, because their detachment from the body is like, a normal thing, right? However, carnal individuals are connected to matter, right? To this body, right? With impure consciences, retain the impression of matter much longer. In other words, they're still going to be connected. And if you want to have a nice reading about that, you can read the book Memoirs of a Suicide, right? So that book has an absolutely fantastic, Yvonne brings to us an absolutely fantastic description of what exactly happens to that spirit who's going to a traumatic incident of taking their own lives, and how much that connection is strong to the point that they think they're living, right? It's like they're housed. They just and you realize, no, it's actually they are in a cemetery connected to their bodies still, right? But in their minds, like, this is my life. I have a house. I live here. I have a number. This is my friends. So this disconnect between reality and not is incredible, right? And that's important for us to know, because when we move on to the chapter, you're going to realize some spirits are going to be stuck, like dead stuck into that state of confusion, and that's what this caravan is trying to help, right? All right, my friend. So a little learning from the Spirit's book here. We're going to continue on into our chapter number 5. And for those who are still hanging in there, again, I would suggest that you when you read this chapter, you kind of pay attention on the little details that are buried in there. Okay, we're going to bring some of them, but not all of them. Okay. So the first shocking scene 1. I'll call them shocking scenes, right? So in my book, it's page 52, which is the beginning of chapter 5, right? And I'm going to read straight from the book for you guys, right? So it's right in the beginning here in the book, okay? So they're now approaching the beach where everything happened, and they're seeing everything going on, and Manuel is trying his best to describe everything in details for us, right? And Manuel draws his attention to a group of spirits, almost like attacking recently discarnate spirits, almost like animals. So his guy's like, this is like, looks like animals fighting over like a dead body or something, right? And then Dr. White's going to say, well, these are the spirits. Yeah, they're behaving like that because they're fighting over this energies from the recent discarnates, right? How is that? So I'm going to read from the book. With this attitude, the spirits, so they attack the despairing newly discarnates in an attempt to feed off their animal energies. There's this vital principle, right? The energy that they carry in the animal bodies, right? Starting the unfortunate process of vampirization. That's what they call it. Like vampires, like sucking blood kind of thing. But now they're sucking leftover animalized energy from that body that just died, right? Identifying those who led irresponsible lives, right? So they attack specific spirits, right? Enabling them to tune into their vibrations. So they're going to go and attack the spirits to discriminate only if, see detail, if they can actually connect to that energy. In other words, the person disconnected has to be vibrating at the same, like a radio, right? Has to be tuned in to the same vibration that they are. Otherwise, they can't really facilitate that. Okay? So, enabling them to tune into their vibrations, they seek to drain them, right? Speeding up their decomposition and drawing them to regions of misery where they still subject them to abuse and mental exploitation. So it's a tough thing. So they're going to go and prey on them. They're going to attack them mentally by sending images and vibrations and thoughts that are very um, tragic and problematic and stressful, and but also by draining their vital energies from the body that's still there, hanging connected to the spirit, so they can still feel it. So it's a very challenging scene if you think about it, right? And since they are, and it continues, right? And since they're so wretched, they vie for victims like wild animals vying for the spoils of the hunt. So it's like, when animals are hunting, right? Same idea. They see the spoils of the hunt, they all got together, they kind of serve themselves in that scenario, right? Our commitment at the moment entails removing the victims from this place or the locale and trying to awake them to their spiritual reality. So that is the goal. That is the goal of the mission, right? And why is it important? Because now you can understand the problem, right? You have this place where all the spirits are going around, and there's all this vibrations, the negativity, the suffering, and everything, like everything we talked about. And now you have this spirits obsessing, attacking, right? Other spirits that are discriminating, making them suffer, like draining their energies and making things even harder, right? So all of them need help. So now the mission will come and help all of them, right? They'll help the victims, right, by taking them to a safer place that they can be rescued and assessed by spiritual friends, and also help them awake for their new spiritual reality, right? So that's the mission we're going to hear about from the next few chapters, actually. Okay. Now, what's another really cool, really, really cool thing that happens in this chapter is understanding the importance of this multicultural, ecumenical approach to rescue, right? I really hope we could learn, all of us collectively in this planet, the importance of that, right? I know, my friends, I know we're there. I know you guys understand this, but I think a lot of people nowadays would need this learning, right? Of like, why is it important to have different cultural backgrounds, different faiths, different experiences, different lives, and respect that and live together, right? There you go. So I'm going to read to you an interesting, I really like this passage now, from paragraph 5, chapter 5. It's talking about Abdul, right? So Abdul, which is part of the mission, right? He's Dr. Abdul coming. He's wearing his traditional Muslim gear, right? The garb. Raised his voice and tried to help the spirits, right? Recited like verses from the Quran, right? And he continued doing that, right? So he continued chanting, emitting a special and profound vibration during these chants, that suddenly there was this terrifying silence. So all the spirits that were vampirizing the other bodies at the moment, they stopped, right? As if the spirits that were vampirizing were snapping out of their madness, right? And that's through the chants of the Quran. How cool is that? Like, and just be honest right now. How many of you guys that are spiritists that are, read all things nice about spiritism and all that? How many of you thought about that before? Because I'll be honest with you, I that's something I've never really carefully thought about until I started studying Manoel Philomeno de Miranda years ago, right? Because then I started to realize like how powerful every single culture, religion, tradition. Like everyone has a way of managing scenarios like this. Of course, because the spirits discriminating, they're discriminating in different countries, different traditions, different religions, right? But all of them are aligned, right, with the goal of helping each other, right? And fulfilling the mission of the creator, which is to progression, like to grow. Right? Beautiful, right? So his chanting of the Quran basically snapped out the vampirizers, right, out of their madness, right? So that's when they started to approach. They lit a torch, which is a symbolic torch based on light from their thoughts, right? Lifted above their heads and overcame with astonishment. The vampires and explorers stopped their attack. So how did they stop their attack? Right? By reading the Quran in chants, right? In this nice rhythm, special, inspiring reading of the Quran. Okay? So one of them stood out with his hideous, cruel countenance, shouting that he had nothing to fear, that all should turn against the invaders and subdue them. So he wanted to attack, to fight, right? Dr. Badul remained unfazed, however, and continued to recite the book with respect and seriousness. Ha, two words, right? Remember Jesus what said? The apostles came to them, it's like, my Lord, why I can't remove this bad spirit, right? Well, you guys don't have faith, right? So the respect and seriousness here and the consistency is the manifestation of faith of Dr. Badul, right? And we should learn from that, right? Because when we are dealing with spiritual issues, right, we also sometimes our faith is a little bit shaky, right? So that's important. And that produced a huge impact on this crazed horde. So Dr. White then explained, continue, that what happened shortly before, on the 26th of, it was still December, right? Starting at 8 a.m., is that all of them reaped by death needed repose, and their remains should be cremated collectively in order to avoid diseases and follow such tragedies, such as we here already happened. So Dr. White's now okay. So now that Dr. Badul helped, right, we're going to rescue this individual. So we're going to, obviously, the Muslim faith is very strong in that area. So that's, of course, that's why they have that member, right, in the group to rescue. But we had more people. Well, we had Father Marcos, right? Remember the priest. So let's see what Father Marcos did. Everybody's doing something, guys. We should do it too, right? That's the goal of this story, right? So the spirit riders, right, watched in obvious astonishment as Father Marcos now, right, took from this claw-like hand of one of them the spirit of a newly deceased individual who, because the bonds to his spirit had not yet been completely severed from his physical body, was still thrashing amid the physical fluids, a state that caused the spirit inexpressible anguish, along with the terror he felt as a result of the cruel torment, who finally yielded to the priest's kind gesture. So now, as a spirit discarnating, not only discarnating in a tragedy and everything's turning around, you don't know what's going on. Now there's all those spirits that are trying to come and attack you. Imagine how would you feel, and you're still connected to your body, and you still feel what your body feels still. Oh, this is a tough one, right? You're feeling your body decomposing. There's a spirit trying to torment you and making sounds and voices and images to make you scared. And then this is all happening at the same time. You don't even know if you're awake or not, if you're sleeping or not, if you're dead or not. Like this is the chaos really of that scenario, right? But Father Marcos continues, right? Observing the ties that stretched to one of the corpses in a deplorable state of decay, so he was still connected to his dead, decomposing body, right? The priest used this counterclockwise circular movements on the crown chakra, which is at the top of the head, right? The energy centers, the vital energy centers, right? To disconnect the spirit, right? Who moaned and unspeakable agony until it happened, right? And then what happened is Manuel was like, hey, wait a minute, I can do that too, right? They learned how to help disconnect these bonds, these ties that connect, right? Your your coronal chakra, right, to the to the body, right, that's decomposing. And by dissolving that connection, they are now starting to help many of the spirits in the process of discarnation. So this is quite impressive. But cool is that we do that in the Spirit Center too, right? We do passes, right? Our passes very often are positioned at the coronal center, right, which is the highest vibratory center in our vital at our vital centers, and it connects to all the other centers, right? So this is so cool because that's exactly the technique they're using. They're actually giving passes, right? To try to dissolve, to break, right, the connection, so the spirit can finally move in, right, into their spiritual life. How nice is that, friends? Think about it, right? It's everything emotion, right, from God, from our Master Jesus, and all that. So he continues that, although the description continues, right, and he's describing the threats, the bullying from the other discarnate spirits that are trying there to attack, right, the discarnated individuals, always threatening, always shouting, and but they never change, they never connect to it. See, that's the trick. So the trick in that scenario is that although they're being exposed and bombarded and attacked by all kinds of things, by connecting to the creator in a good mission, they cannot be affected by it. And Manoel Philomeno de Miranda, in many books, who bring that same principle, which is the remedy against spiritual influence, negative spiritual influence, that make sure you vibrate with our creator. Because if you do that, then there's really nothing that can, if you're in a mission to help others, there's nothing that's gonna make things bad for you. It's not gonna happen, right? Don't worry, right? They need help. So the spirits that are doing all these attacks and all, they need more help, right? And they will be helped at their own time, right? But it's important for us to kind of think about how we think, how we act, how we feel, right? Knowing ourselves, right? How important it is. And you can translate this to your work, right? When you work and something bad happens, right? And you're stressed out, right? How do you deal with that, right? Do you connect to that energy? Do you write that email right away that you're going to regret for sure? Or do you sleep over on it? Sleep on it and do it another time. Like, do you do that, right? Do you connect to the energy of the attacker, or do you connect to the energy that comes from there, right? Do you send back some good, nice vibrations, or do you send back exactly what you get? Think about it. So the way Manoel Philomeno is actually into that chaos and still helping and not phased by anything, and Charles White and Abdullah and Father Marcus, because they are creating their own shields of protection by emanating the good vibrations that they're there for. Right? That's a very important message we have in this chapter. All right, my friends. So, and now we're gonna kind of going to the end of this chapter, and I'm gonna read only one story, which it's a sad story, but it's a very interesting story to illustrate what's going on. Right? It's the rescue of the woman and the baby. That's my book is chapter 55, right? Also page 55. So Manoel Philomeno continues, right? And he says, attending to this frenzied woman holding an equally tearful and inconsolable child, I perceived that her insanity had occurred at the moment that she had tried to save herself and her little girl by going up to the top part of their house until a wave tore it apart from the foundations, smashing into pieces, and taking their lives, right? So one could see it all recorded in her mind. See, so her mind projects thoughts. The thoughts are like a movie going on and on and on in her mind. So when the spirits come to help her, what they see is exactly that scene repeating itself in her mind, right? Now, my friends, does that happen in other scenarios? Oh, yes. That one moment or one person or one thing that went wrong or said something wrong to you, whatever that is. Remember when you catch yourself thinking about it all the time? It's like almost like this interfering thought. It's like you think about it and again and again and again. Watch out, because that's exactly what happens in the spiritual world. The spirits are going to see exactly that, how stuck we get, right, into these things. Now, this is a very tragic event. We don't compare to that, right? But important to know. Okay. So she could not stop screaming for help, rightly believing she was being pursued by demonic beings who wanted to subjugate her. And that's how the vampirizing spirits were presenting themselves. That's exactly what they wanted. They wanted shock. They wanted to have control, right? Touching her forehead and emitting successive waves of love and peace. This is Manuel, right? I perceived that she was capturing my thoughts because she was open to religious faith. She was open to receiving help. That's another important topic, okay? She could tell that I was helping both her and her daughter, and she let me take her out of the circle in which she was imprisoned, although she was still connected to her tethered body. The little one was freed from the perspiritual injunction of matter very quickly and quiet down per receiving the vibrations I sent her. Yvonne, his friend Yvonne, came to help out, and we began to focus on attention on the bonds that kept the mother attached to her useless body. Shortly after, as we managed to cut the bonds between the spirit and matter, she finally calmed down and let herself be taken a while, weeping, lamenting the fact that she had discarnated, right? And then they had a nice conversation with her, talking about her family, the importance of the maternal importance of taking care of her babies and her family. And she finally allowed herself to be rescued from that moment. So, this is, there are, this is a challenging moment, right? There's a lot to learn, even in any tragedy. Things that happen now in the spiritual world, we're learning about the good things, the challenging things that happen, right? He also talked about some incarnates that are searching and removing items from the bodies, which obviously there's very significant consequences for it, right? Both in spiritual and physical. And after the rescue, the spirits were assisted. Most of them would sleep or be in an unconscious state for a while, and they were transported back to the rescue outposts, right? And that's the first step into that mission, my friends. There's a lot more to come as we continue in this beautiful journey of planetary transition by our friend Manoel Philomeno de Miranda. So now it's time for us to have a little chat. And if you guys have any questions, I can see you guys here. I have a lot of thumbs up and hearts and a lot of comments. That's very nice to have that. Thank you guys. All right. I'm gonna wait a few minutes if you guys have any questions, but this is like where we really start to get into the mission now, like to the core, right, of this book. And my friends, next week we're going to try to be doing all the 2 chapters, right? So we try to do number 6 and 7. Oh yeah, 6 and 7. I know some of you might remember what was going on with 6, 7 recently, right? That's not related to it. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. I see a big thank you there. So nice to have you. Thank you very much. So we're going to be doing chapter 6 and 7, right? And we're going to be talking about next week the work of illumination, right? And after that, we're going to see love as a divine power. How beautiful is that? Love is a divine power, right? Chapter 7. Okay, my friends, it was absolutely fantastic to have this time with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. As you can tell, it's an amazing book. We're learning a lot every day. If you have a chance to read, it makes it even more cool, the discussion. So chapter 6 and 7 for next Monday at 10. We're going to be connecting here again at the Toronto Spirit Society and Kardec Radio. And thank you so much for your time today. And may God bless our week. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.